You'll see more about how that works, so don't be intimidated if it doesn't make sense quite yet. But we are namespacing these style rules, and in this case, since we have multiple sections on the page, we're even namespacing it not just to the page itself, but we're namespacing it to the section on the page by using an ID. And then we're specifying these divs, and I'm using this nth child 1, 2, and 3 to just say the first, second, and third div. I don't have to decorate those in my HTML with classes or IDs. I can just refer to them as first, second, and third. Now, the important thing to note here is this style rule right here. Implementing a flexbox, I want you to be confident, is super, super simple. There's not a lot of stuff you have to do. All you have to do is change the display. This is the property that Michael and I were both telling you about. Has a lot of different values, and one of them is -ms-flexbox. So it's vendor specific for now, but in the future that would change to just flexbox.
Sure.
Yeah. But for now it's -ms-flexbox, and that makes this flexbox element, the one with the ID of flexbox, let's go back to it, it makes that flexbox element all of a sudden a flexbox. Done.
Simple div now kind of turns into this flexbox thing.
Yeah, it acts like a big control with all kinds of functionality, but all we did was really change its display value. Now, although that's all we did, I added some more attributes in here just to make it play kind of well. One of the things that we can specify is the packing. Now, the packing is the alignment of the child items along the axis of layout. So in this case, our axis of layout is horizontal. We're going from left to right because that's the default. And so our packing controls the spacing between our child items in that horizontal direction. So let's go look again at the effect.
Sure.
The effect is that we've got a horizontal box here, and its children are distributed equally in that space. Cool. Imagine for a second how you might try to do that in legacy layout.
That'd be tough. And so what you're saying is those three colors really represent those, I believe, 3 divs that were inside of that newly formed flexbox.
Correct. Correct. Cool. Yep. Just that distribution would have, I think you would have to get into some math and do some JavaScript in order to lay out those.
And a lot of designers don't want to do math.
They don't want to do that.
No.
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 Okay, let's look at another feature of the flexbox. We'll show you the effect first. There's the same flexbox with the same 3 children, red, green, blue. But now you'll notice they're actually filling that space. As opposed to just being distributed, they're filling it. In the flexbox terms, that's called flexing.
Flexing.
Yeah, so just like a bodybuilder, we're able to flex and really show off some power here. So let's go to section 2 in the CSS. You can follow along if you've got Code Show downloaded. We're still using a display of flexbox, but I took the packing off because that's not necessary right now. And instead, not at the flexbox layer, but down at the child layer, I am specifying for the first 2 that I want them to have a -ms-flex value. Now, the -ms-flex value property takes 3 individual terms for its value. The first one specifies its relative amount of flex.
Relative amount? Boy, that was a mouthful.
Yeah, so we're into quantum physics now.
Okay.
It's actually quite simple. It means relative to all of the other children who are flexing, how much should you flex?
Hey, so the third one doesn't have a value.
It doesn't. It doesn't. So by default, it's not capable of flexing.
Oh.
Yeah. The first 2 are, but the second one is told it should be twice as big as the first one.
I see.
In other words, since these are relative, this is exactly the same as this.
Oh.
It could be really whatever values you want.
So you can really get complicated here if you wanted to.
They're proportional, exactly. Sure. The next value is the recommended size, and that means that you have the ability to suggest what size you want this element to be, but the flexbox parent still has a little bit of control over what that size is going to be.
I see.
Okay?
Yep.
We'll skip the third for now and just go look at that effect again. The first and second items are flexing, but the second item is taking up twice as much space as the first one because it had a flex value of 2. Okay?
Cool. Yes.
So there's lots more properties on the flexbox to look at. I mentioned that the packing is the alignment, the control of the alignment of the child items in your flexbox along the axis of layout, horizontally in this case. The alignment of the flexbox items is their alignment perpendicular to the direction of layout. So we could, if this flexbox had some height, we could control the vertical alignment of these children by using the ms-flex-align property.
Cool.
Yeah, but let's look real quick at a third and very powerful feature of the flexbox, and that is its ability to wrap. So the flexbox is laying these things out horizontally, And when it gets to the end of your container, by default, it just runs over the end of your container, and you have to specify your overflow and determine what happens to stuff that overflows your container. But if you tell your Flexbox, I want you to wrap, let's go look at that code.
Sure.
The section 3 is the wrapping Flexbox. At the Flexbox level, now we not only set the display to -ms-Flexbox, but we also set the flex wrap to wrap. And now it's going to wrap. It's easy as that. And just for fun, we're setting the 7th child here to red just to see that you can affect the individual items still. And so now we have a wrapping set of divs, the 7th of which is red.
Awesome.
And the last example just shows you how you can vertically lay those out. Now, in Kojo, we have lots of plans to add lots more examples into here so that you can see all the different things that a Flexbox can do. But for now, what you see is what you get. We've got a little bit of horizontal, a little bit of vertical. But I want to take you now to the grid. The grid is another one of these awesome CSS layout features, but very different from the Flexbox. Hey everybody, welcome back.
Hello.
We are on Module 4 of this session on developing Windows 8 apps using the web platform. And Module 4 is all about JavaScript. So we're going to jump into, right now, the JavaScript core capabilities. Obviously, we're going to leave some things out, but we're going to get to those in a subsequent module. So stay tuned for sure. JavaScript is an interesting beast. I like to say that it's the weirdest language I've ever loved. There's just some oddities with the language that are peculiar. But it's great. It's actually a wonderful language, and it's really awesome that we're built on this stack now. We've got all the benefits of JavaScript brought into the client world, so it's pretty exciting. Let me introduce you to the content that we're going to cover here. We're going to be looking at an overview of JavaScript itself, the language, and then we're going to look at a few of the core tenets, the basic principles of JavaScript development. It might be a review for some of you, which is completely fine. But we're going to look at the variables, the nature of functions in the JavaScript language, and what the implications on the function scope is for us. And then we're going to look at arrays, and we're going to look at objects. And that covers a lot of the basics. You don't necessarily get into the control structures and the prototyping and a lot of the more advanced things, but we can definitely pick those up at another time. So let's first climb right into the history of JavaScript. Again, might be review, but JavaScript's been around for a little while. In 1995, Brendan Eich was an employee at Netscape and started working on JavaScript as a way to give a little bit more control over what was happening on the client side after they downloaded their web page from your web server. We wanted to add a little bit of functionality to that client side, take a little bit of the work off the server, not just deliver content and be done, but be able to traverse the content and say maybe move things around or conditionally show things or hide things. So that was the effort. In '97, it got formalized by ECMAScript, so it's now a formal standard. And a little bit of trivia here. Any idea what ECMAScript stands for? What is the ECMA?
It sounds like that thing on Roadrunner and Coyote. You know?
No, that's Acme.
Well, that's Acme.
Yeah, the bomb
Acme.
brand.
Yeah.
Right. No.
Yeah, ECMA is, I don't know.
Yeah, ECMA is different. ECMA technically doesn't stand for anything.
What?
It used to. It's an old standard from like the 60s, and it was the European Computer Manufacturers Association, but now it is officially just ECMA. So I think it's kind of like KFC. Used to be Kentucky Fried Chicken, no longer. It's just KFC.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah. Anyway, there have been a lot of advances in JavaScript. It's been evolving over the last couple of decades, and with a really interesting evolution, and lately has just gained a lot of momentum. In 2009, it moved to the back end with Node.js. A lot of excitement about Node.js and actually writing JavaScript on the server with Node.js. So that's exciting. And then in 2012, in just a few days actually, it's moving to the client with Windows 8.
And I think what I really like about how you showcase that, when most web developers think about JavaScript, they're always thinking about JavaScript running in the context of a browser, which is normal for everyone to think, right? That Node.js comment was really good because It is on the server. It's something operating on the server that can dish stuff down to the client. So we started getting everyone familiar with the idea, or people started getting familiar with the idea that JavaScript doesn't have to be just a browser language. So I love that you brought that out so that it can transition easier to how it can be an application language as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can see that some of the provisions that it gives for us are really interesting because we're on a client, we're in a, what's normally considered a more controlled environment, and yet the dynamic nature of JavaScript just kind of opens that wide up. So you'll see what I mean. You'll understand here soon. JavaScript is not officially an object-oriented programming language. It's prototype-based. And that works completely differently. You can emulate objects, but you don't have classic objects, classic inheritance, or anything like that. It's also dynamic and weakly typed. So dynamic means you can just drop properties onto objects or whatever anytime you want, anytime in the cycle. And if you get yourself in trouble, that's your job as the developer to make sure that those are checked, those are resolved, and you're not letting the user know that you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Weakly typed meaning that you don't have a strict rule that says that if you call this a string from the get-go, it's going to have to act like a string. Everything's declared with a var. And so that's the weak type nature. Variables, a function can receive a variable of whatever type. It doesn't have to be decided what type that is. And you can even make decisions then based on the types that are passed into your variables.
Yeah.
It does consider functions to be first class. So functions are objects, and they can be thrown around, moved around, manipulated. Properties can be added to them, just like any other object in JavaScript. So the way that JavaScript treats functions is a bit different. And Michael's going to talk about that a lot more coming up soon. But thank goodness, JavaScript is C-like syntax, so it's got the same angle braces and semicolons that we're used to, pretty much the same structure that we're used to. So it's going to look really familiar, even if you haven't worked with JavaScript much before. It's going to look really familiar. Now, the first thing that we're going to start with is variables. We're going to declare variables so that we have a place to store things. And the things that we're storing, it could be almost anything. It could be a string, a number, a Boolean, array, this catch-all object, which could be absolutely anything that you want. And then a variable can also be at any point holding the value of null or the value of undefined. So if you ask about a variable and it doesn't exist yet, then it's going to say that that is undefined. If you ask for a variable and it hasn't been initialized yet, hasn't been instantiated, then it's going to declare that that is null. That's what it's going to report. So let's look at some of the variable definitions. Now to do this, you won't be able to go into the Code Show project because some of these demos are just going to be quick little changes that I'm going to make for you kind of on the fly. And so there's not a Code Show demo for it. I'm just going to jump into what I call my sandbox, type some code, and then we'll run the app and see that code happen. Now I did, in my log function here, I'm outputting the function that I wrote. So when we get to the app screen, you're still going to be able to see the code. So hopefully that's a little bit handy. Let's go ahead and write some code. Let's go to this onReady function, and let's write var myString equals hello world. There we go. That's how we declare a string variable with the var keyword. And if we were doing a Boolean, we would do it the exact same way. Okay? So we're using that var keyword, whatever type we happen to be using. And then in my little sandbox app here, I can log my string. And we can run this. And as I mentioned, you can still see that code there, but you can see that it's logged out this string hello world. So that's how we store things. That's how we receive things from functions. It says as these variables. And that's really all there is to say about variables. Now, beyond variables, we're going to get into functions, which of course are objects, and so they can be stored in variables. But functions have really interesting behavior in JavaScript. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to Michael, and he's going to tell you about functions and function scope.
Yeah, as was mentioned by Mr. Jeremy, functions are first-class citizen. They can be used so many different ways, and we feel, and in fact, I feel like there's almost this discovery if you're coming, especially from a strongly typed language. I was very passionate about C#, and I wasn't necessarily just all in with JavaScript. So coming into the JavaScript world, I really got to see, wow, there's a lot of power with functions. So what I want to do is just take a tour of how to get started with them, and then we're going to progressively see how advanced and how powerful they can really be. So let's go ahead and take a look now at our agenda. You know, up to this point, of course, we've had our overview. We've discussed what variables are, how to do some basic assignments, and now I want to get into some of the